quorum.
I can see it.
I can see it here.
You can see it on the screen.
I can see it on the screen. Yep. So Ms. Gadd is looking up at the camera over here in the corner. This is the executive committee of the Metro Council. I do detect a quorum with myself, Vice Mayor Angie Henderson, Clay Capp, Chair of Charter Revision Committee, Chair Gadd of Arts, Parks, Libraries, and Entertainment, Chair Prep T for Rules, Confirmations, and Public Elections, and Chair Parker for Transportation and Infrastructure. Thank you all for being here. Okay, we're gonna just head right into the agenda. You all have seen at previous meetings, we are trying to get some policies in place in support and assistance to staff and just for consistency, and so that those kind of, live beyond us each term and kind of get in place, but certainly soliciting feedback from the executive committee and your input. And so last we met in November, you all received our draft proclamations and presentations policy. We requested feedback by December 5th. I think maybe we said 15th in here, but then when we emailed it out to everybody, we kind of pulled the date a little bit forward. So what you see in front of you now is the updated with your feedback in it, and that is in front of you. And the most significant change, I would say, is rather than 5 copies of your proclamations and presentations, we have 10. So again, we're gonna advise members, sometimes you just need 3, sometimes you only need 4, I think after maybe a few notorious examples that included entire football and wrestling teams, and maybe they didn't pick them all up, we thought we might back it down a little bit, but obviously, we're trying to kind of get these firmed up, but we also can be somewhat iterative if we start to see that, just like we encountered with 5, that was a problem for a couple of folks, understandably, and so just thought 10 was a kind of a sweet spot. So, Ms. Darby, do you want to share anything else that was updated? I know there was sort of a section at the end related to the presentation time itself.
So at the end of page 3, there's a new section added called Presentation Day, and it basically just lets staff know that we should be putting copies of the presentations on or give them to the member making the presentation, putting it up at the dais for the pro tem, and then giving it to Vice Mayor as well. Right, and just kind of making sure it's, it's out on the public podium, everybody gets it, everybody knows kind of where it's going to be. I think maybe we added, it might have already been in there, but I do want to remind you all in your capacity, and we'll remind members as well, but this basically is a representation of this digital copy that Melanie has very kindly put together, but basically little parchment color, it has the ribbon, it's got the blue border. So there's a digital version of this that is in that online proclamation archive. That's not what will be in your folder, but this is just sort of an example of that. We put that in the internal newsletter a couple times. So whomever are your partners in your resolution, whether it be a nonprofit, they can go and pull that down and print it out. I was pleased on Monday to attend a press conference for Special Olympics. And so the Special Olympics resolution that we had passed, like they had this version in the folder. So I think that's going to be useful, and I appreciate staff getting that together. And then as well, just to show you here, and we're going to kind of be proactive about indicating to council members which is the different one, but each resolution will have a presentation copy. The presentation copy has a seal on the inside. That way when you stand to take a picture with the proclamation, you can see the seal. So this is the double seal envelope. You get one of those with each proclamation. It will be marked by staff so you know
this is the one for the photos, et cetera. And then the other ones are just single seals. They don't have an extra seal on the inside. So these are just here for your reference and to look at as we bring that proclamations policy kind of to the finish line. So appreciate y'all's input on that, and we're going to as well, I think, on all these sort of in-house policies for staff and members reference, start to get just sort of a standard top bar on it, and then anytime something is updated, we'll just do it kind of at the end of the document, you know, this was updated effective, whatever, so that we can kind of keep track of those changes. Okay, anything else on proclamations and presentations policy at this time?
Just a thank you for the work.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Thank you to staff. Yeah, we're glad to have those proclamations archived online. That's public facing, and Melanie, can you share with us where, when we land on Nashville.gov council, kind of where we go to find those?
So when you go to Nashville.gov and you hit the navigation pane in the legislative resources page, there's a section called Proclamation Archive. One is the Excel sheet that kind of just shows what the title of the proclamation was, everyone who signed on, so you can sort through and find it from there and click out from there, or you can go to the main folder and just look through yourself. But on there, the only person listed for that proclamation is the lead sponsor.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate staff's work on that, because that is, that's new. We have not really kept up with those in the past that we have done. So, okay. So next, want to make y'all aware, we've had a fair amount of back and forth with our partners, and really do appreciate Metro Police and the Sheriff's Office. So this is also in your stack or packet. As you all will recall, in recent months, we have kind of effectuated a transition whereby, rather than by contract, but rather employees of the Sheriff's Office, because Margaret, is it state law or county, but basically the sheriffs have the purview of the safety of the courthouses, and so.
Correct, and for many years that was contracted out, and now they've taken it back in-house for our building, as I'm sure you all are aware and have seen.
Right. And so, you know, subsequent to, some recent activity, it came to our awareness that we might want to make sure that the duties of the Sergeant at Arms were clear. What were the duties of the sheriff? Who has purview over kind of what and where. And, you know, our staff has always done a nice job interacting with MNPD and our Sergeant at Arms, but, you know, we had seen quite a few different Sergeant at Arms, and I know for those of us who had been serving previously, I could probably count on just a few fingers the folks who had been sitting in that seat, you know, for kind of years and years and years. And so, you know, we, you know, I'll just be frank, post-Goyam Defense League and them kind of showing up here and kind of wanting to be sure we understood the protocols of kind of who was responsible for what and who was communicating with whom. And then as well, we had just gotten some kind of questions and feedback about this role. And so we appreciate MNPD. This is basically a guidance document for whomever will serve in that capacity, right? So if you are going to, and our suggestion has been that in any one term, that is not more than, Margaret, where do we arrive at 2 or 3 people?
I think it's 3.
3, right, so there's not a new officer showing up every single time and having to get up the curve, but that is a very specific cohort of individuals who will have received this packet. You know, things just to kind of bring to your attention, you know, things that I had wondered about, like, oh, you know, say somebody needs the AED, or thought, like, that is the Sergeant at Arms responsibilities. They will administer that, right? Like, so just kind of situational awareness, expectations, and
this has got the sign-off of the sheriff's office and M&PD, and we did a fair amount of kind of back and forth, and here we are. So I would welcome your questions and feedback. That said, this is a document of M&PD, right? And they kindly requested our input, and they were very collegial in the back and forth on that. And so, you know, it's not really, doesn't live with us, right? It's not our document. But Margaret, is there anything else you want to share about Sergeant at Arms responsibilities and overview?
I don't think so. You know, I think the main thing is that inside the chamber area is overseen by the Sergeant at Arms. Outside the chamber is overseen by the sheriff's office personnel. So if somebody were to need to be ejected from the chamber for, you know, disruption or what have you, we've had that happen the one time during presentations period. They would be escorted out, and then the sheriff's office would help escort them out of the building.
And I mean, I think it was important for us to kind of get together on talking about this because, you know, the Sergeant at Arms is a singular individual. And if you have a group and there's like, you know, kind of when can the sheriff's office be invited in to assist with, you know, and just kind of thinking that through, you know, if this, then that, you know, if this were to happen, if somebody had a heart attack, what would we do? If somebody were to be, you know, so I think we've tried to think through just basically some public safety not eventualities. We hope they weren't, those won't happen. But
Another thing also.
Yeah,
so one thing that that these responsibilities do indicate is that it's the Sergeant at Arms will respond to the presiding officer's directives. So if something were happening in the chamber that needed the attention of the Sergeant at Arms, such as the disruption that was happening that day, it's the presiding officer that makes the determination about what happens in the chamber, not the other 40 members of the body. So if there are concerns about something happening, you know, members of the body could come up to the dais and, you know, we could relay that information to the presiding officer, but it's up to the presiding officer to determine, you know, whether someone is ejected from the room or not.
yeah, right. And that's not really the only role, but go ahead, Chair Gabb.
Just a follow-up question on that. If something like that happens, things happen very quickly. So do we need to go up to the dais to talk to someone to then have them talk to the Sergeant at Arms, or we as members, are we allowed to just talk to the Sergeant at Arms? This is disruption that's occurring. It looks like a safety issue.
If there's a disruption that's occurring that looks like a safety issue, they will not take direction from you regarding whether or not the disruption rises to the level of escorting someone out of the room and removing
But they'll take it from the folks at the dais.
presiding officer. So that's either the vice mayor or the chair of the committee or the
Speaker pro
president
tem, or if someone's out of if a presiding officer is not on the floor at that time, but you witness something, then the presiding officer is then the next any
at
40 chair.
that point,
So it would be members here in the executive committee?
well, at that point, there's not a meeting going on. So
Okay, so it doesn't matter.
presiding officer means that there is
It's inactive.
and there's a meeting
And so when
happening at that point, someone is presiding.
I'm just trying to understand, sometimes things, as we witnessed, happen very quickly or it becomes very chaotic, and so a presiding officer may be trying to verbally handle something, so just trying to understand when you can actually communicate with somebody.
Yeah, no, I do encourage members, you know, I do my best to keep apprised of what is happening in the gallery and in the room and with the meeting. But, you know, if there's something that is of concern, or maybe somebody in the gallery has relayed that to you, that they've heard something that's concerning as it relates to
Just go up to the
safety.
presiding officer, but
Right, I mean, I would approach the dais. That said, it is not my intent to put a barrier between you and the Sergeant at Arms. I mean, if you are seeing something, witnessing something, having a question, like, I think the distinction is you can make that person aware, but you cannot instruct that person, right? Yeah.
If I may, I think in like a practical sense, like thinking of like if you're seeing something occurring that's super concerning in
Yeah.
the back,
Yeah.
what one course of action would be to go up to the sergeant at arms, say, hey, can you check on that, and then go up to the presiding officer and
correct.
say,
That's
hey,
what I would assume.
sergeant at arms is now aware,
That would be
but
my assumption.
this
I would do
happened
by
back here.
action in reality if there was a
Right.
real time. And
Yes.
just I think that's great though.
Right, nobody's trying to keep you from interacting with the sergeant at arms, but as far as kind of like next level.
The protocol of where they, no, that
Right,
makes
like
sense.
it's their,
Okay.
I think that is their preference, right? Like if they're gonna be actually directed to do something, that comes from the presiding officer. But you're not prohibited from speaking with that individual or making them, or that officer making them aware of something. But you do need to kind of also make Margaret and or Hannah aware so that they can make me aware.
Okay.
But I appreciate that. I mean, that's.
Yeah,
that
just
is-
thinking through
Yeah,
real life.
absolutely.
Um, Unfortunately, the way those things transpire.
Yep.
Aren't very organized. But that makes complete sense. Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions? Again, similarly, you receive it here, we'll talk about it. If you have any additional questions or feedback, we can incorporate that. But again, don't want to hurry if you all want to continue to discuss it here, but just, floor is open if you have any other suggestions, but also know that, you have time to review it more closely and get back with us. Anybody else on this one in particular? Okay. I appreciate that though, Ms. Gabb, that kind of clarification. If this, then that, like, should you engage that person, what's the direction? So.
That's helpful. Thank you.
All right, so, okay, that's Sergeant at Arms and those responsibilities. Next, we have a draft of clarifications and additions to the scheduling meetings policy. Scheduling meetings policy, we did really early in executive committee. That was early on. And so I'm not sure if that's the latest effective date or what that date is at the top. I presume that's our most recent effective date. But Margaret and or Hannah, do you want to kind of summarize what these draft clarifications and additions are, or I'm happy to do so.
Sure, these are primarily about, scheduling the committee meetings or working group meetings. We've had some working groups this term, and just about when the public notice goes out, how it goes out, whether or not members of committees get direct invitations. Currently, invitations are not sent directly through email to committee members or the full council unless specifically requested by the chair of the committee. But the meetings are noticed on the legislative calendar, which everybody has access to through your phones and your
Outlook.
Your Outlook. That's primarily what the changes are, because those have these questions have kind of come up over the past year, especially with we've had a lot of working group meetings and a lot of special committees happening, special meetings of committees happening. So just kind of laying out the protocol there that invitations are not sent
By default.
by
Right,
default.
right.
They must be requested to be sent.
So you all got an invitation for this executive committee because it doesn't happen really on a standard cadence. Chair Parker sent an invitation, and whether that's the committee or the full body, if you have a special called meeting and you want to bring that into it's on the calendar, but if you want to kind of assess how many people are attending or whatever, it can be sent as an invitation, but we're not going to default do that for everything, because if you could imagine for every standing meeting and whatever, your inbox would really start to stack up. So, Chair Parker, did you recognize? Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, so I appreciate the very specific and formal clarification about the email notices and the calendar invites. that's good to have kind of the final word on that so we know how to proceed. The calendar, the Outlook calendar that has all of the council meetings, is there a version of that I can just populate on that individual members can populate in our Outlook?
Yes.
And does that then include like the District 8 Town Hall and the district, it's just the
separate calendar.
We have two internal calendars, but y'all have access to all the internal calendars, and you automatically have access to them. You just have to, you have an iPhone over there. Okay, so there's a certain way for you to say, I want to see it all the time on your phone.
Sure,
on my phone, I don't have iPhone. I've got Google, but I can go through and I can click a button so that the legislative calendar always is populated on my phone, so I can see all those meetings. They're in a different color than the regular color.
Thank you. I might, after the meeting, ask if one of y'all could show
Yeah,
that.
certainly. It's not difficult. It's just an option of choosing a kind of a folder or something.
Thank you.
I used to make the mistake, because on my phone, the legislative calendar's yellow and the continuing ed and events is green, and I'm like, on your green calendar, everybody's like looking at me sideways, like, oh, it's green on my phone, okay. So the legislative calendar has meetings of standing committees, working groups that are of standing committees, your legislative filing deadlines, your amendment deadlines, like anything that is sort of operationally within the purview of standing committee, special call, that is on that legislative calendar. And then continuing ed and events is separate. And then again, in your capacity as chairs, I welcome you and encourage you to email to CO, Council Office Admin @nashville.gov. When you see an interesting webinar, Chair Parker, that's from, America Walks or something, or Ms. Gadd, something that's of interest to parks or committees like that. Don't presume other members are aware of it, we're trying to put things that are kind of have some civic nexus with the work that we're doing. Nonprofit partnership support entities, that kind of stuff.
CLEs.
That maybe you're going to have to maintain that separately. But we are not, though, going to put on there, nonprofit, lovely though it may be, fundraiser that costs $250 for somebody to attend, right? The little bit at the margins is sort of those low-cost contribution requested breakfasts, perhaps, like neighborhood health or something like that. Those that are sort of low barrier to entry, we are putting some of those on there, but largely it is events of general interest that the council is invited to. We used to find over the years, like, y'all know it'd be a council meeting day, and you get in one of your 100 emails, you get an invitation to or a reminder maybe about the pedestrian memorial from Walk Bike. So if you happen to catch the email or you put it on there, that's great. But very often it's like, oh, I missed that, or oh, I missed that. So I do encourage you, we'll get you set afterwards.
At the risk of doing tech support here at this meeting,
Live
on the
with
iPhone,
executive committee.
while you're viewing your calendar, the little picture of yourself in the top left, you tap that and it shows you all your calendars, and you can activate them there.
I'll use your tech support.
Live, it's happening live. Oh, yes, Melanie, go ahead.
If there's an event on Nashville.gov or something that you want to add to your calendar, when you click on that event, there's a bunch of buttons on the side to add to whatever type of phone you have. So like you can add an iCal event by just clicking on a button, and it'll add it to your calendar. If there was like a town hall or a traffic calming or something that you don't have on the continuing ed or legislative calendar, there's a button on Nashville.gov to automatically add it.
Great reminder.
I'll continue to work on this afterwards.
Yeah, I can show you. I figured it out. I can
It
show you.
depends on what app you use for.
I know.
Okay, so again, chairs, as far as, setting a special meeting or a working group, Danielle is your primary point of contact, who's kind of managing all those, right? So she may have one committee is holding that she's trying to get scheduled and hear back from other folks, and you may want to schedule this other meeting. So she's been great, and she was kind to provide these
kind of draft clarifications and additions. Anybody else have any feedback, asks relative to scheduling? The scheduling meeting policy that we did really early on, I mean, this is basically, hate to say hierarchy, but yeah, kind of, right? Like standing committee, regular council meeting, kind of on down. Margaret is like, yes, hierarchy. there is an order. But, you know, if there's, it's helpful for staff to understand and then for members to have this as well, because then nobody's making an arbitrary decision about whether this gets scheduled or doesn't get scheduled. Like it's following this calendaring policy. So, okie dokes. All right. Okay, I think that is everything in the policy space, but to share, we are, I think, kind of in little buckets, following up on a recent press conference request as our kind of media advisory, press releases, templates for that, press conferences. We've kind of been workshopping some of those. I would presume at our next meeting, if not maybe prior for your consideration, we'll have all that in order. That would be my goal. So that one is in progress, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yep, I think that's everything in the policies space. Okay. New resources. I know Councilwoman Sepulveda, by way of her chair update here as pro tem, did want you to know, and I know Margaret's about to send it, but she's got a great resource coming up about little free libraries and kind of how to work on those and locate those in your district and support those. Margaret, is that in the next day or two coming?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. We've all seen the final. I think there was one little update relative to WeGo or something like that, but you should have that any day. I think there's a great picture of Pro Tem Sepulveda, the mayor and others, and the soccer booster club that did one on Harding Place in the last internal newsletter. That was one that she got situated there in partnership with Vigo. So I appreciate her pulling all that together and kind of all the best practices and what she has learned. So she'll, I think, send that out in memo form, and then as well for some of these kind of just, resources, ideas. This is a project that I did, kind of stuff that isn't otherwise formalized through, say, Metro beautification, like a tree planting or, things for which we have sort of standard toolkits. We didn't have anything as it relates to little free libraries, but I know a lot of you have them in our districts and so forth. So we'll put those also like in our resource library too. I promised Ms. Sepulveda I would mention that, and that was one of them. And then let's see, I'm trying to think what else. Okay, social media, as that is a resource to you all. I do want to thank Melanie and Margaret for their work on that. They draft up a whole entire calendar for the month that gets kind of sent and checked and double-checked to go out kind of standardly. You will see in between our standard, hey, a meeting's happening, link here, all that kind of stuff. You're going to see there was one about Council Connect a while back. I'm trying to be pretty deliberate. I know the last we shared about Council Connect was in December, but Council Connect was specifically mentioned on the floor in the last meeting. Member saying she was going to post into that. I did go back to that previous posting and share that and say, there's a new discussion in Council Connect. So, whether you share those right in that moment, they are sort of a stable of resources to you. And, we'll probably repeat Council Connect another time, or, there's stuff about how to volunteer for boards and commissions, stuff about our public comment. But the agenda, where, how we meet, public comment, this is the next meeting, that is on a very standard meeting associated cadence, as are our holidays and that kind of stuff. And I would be grateful for y'all in your capacity as chairs to be intentional, whether on Facebook or Instagram or the site formerly known as Twitter, to share that. And we have been also conferring with the mayor's office and other metro departments and Metro Legal, and we've held our handle on Blue Sky. And Margaret, can you kind of speak to that a little bit? Like, I think we're needing to get just a little bit more information.
Yeah, we're waiting
maybe.
for a little bit more information to, with ITS, we have to be able to archive all of the posts that we make. And so I think right now some other departments are doing some workarounds about, I don't really know how they're doing it, but some kind of workarounds for archiving.
They're screenshotting.
Yeah, they're screenshotting. I don't really want to get in the business of having to screenshot everything that we post. And so my preference would be to wait until we have some sort of archiving tool from ITS, but we are kind of ready to start posting on Blue Sky once we get confirmation that we are doing it properly. So we have that going for us. And then also I just want to, like, to Vice Mayor's point, I really have to commend Melanie
Yes.
for a lot of these videos that she puts together. Like, she's doing all of this herself, and they're really fantastic.
Yay.
They're really good. Well done.
Really, really good.
They really are great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for lifting that up.
Yeah, I think it elevates people's awareness and interactivity, and she cross-posts it to Reels and this and that, so when you see it, like it, because, you know, the algorithms and all those things, more people then see it and share it as you see fit. Okay, also, oh, go ahead, yeah.
On socials, it's really good to hear that we're holding our handles on new platforms. I think, you know, some folks are looking for places where it's easier to find the people you follow and the posts you're interested in seeing and things like that. So the landscape's a little bit fractured, and it was fun when there was kind of one platform to rule them all, but I don't think that that's going to be the case for the foreseeable future. So do we have, like, are most departments kind of looking at trying to figure out the Blue Sky problem? Because I would love to see all the departments there.
I counted maybe 6 or 7 that had held, like Metro Water's holding an account, Parks is holding an account, and so we reached out to the mayor's team, Julie Smith there for comms. I think the intent is for, you know, that to be another
Great.
one, but I think that's always been a little bit of a, you know, each department kind of does a little bit of their own thing, you know, and.
Can we get a MySpace going? Yeah. Some of us are still on MySpace.
Retro.
Thanks, Zanka.
We're gonna
I doubt Melanie remembers Zanka.
I don't even remember that. Okay. Oh, way back machine, right? We'll just.
Not every department has an account on every single one that even we do. So, and we're late to the game, you know, admittedly, but not every department has an account on all of them. So it's hard to say what everybody else is doing, and not everybody has, you know, the same name on each one, and it's all.
I feel like there's a resolution brewing here. It's going to annoy
Please do
every
not do a
department in
resolution about
Metro.
MySpace and Zynga. But you know, as it relates to information about meetings, so you all do not have to kind of reinvent the wheel and create your own post about, you know, hey, this council meeting's coming up. Like, that is just there for you at the ready to share. So yes, absolutely concur. Thank you so much to Melanie for her work on that. It's been really, really helpful. Also, internal newsletter, you all have maybe received 3 of those now. How many have we done? 4, thank you. We have done 4 of those. We have found that you all open them if I send them to on Sunday. So automatic send on Sunday, apparently. That's when council likes to read things more, because the other one I sent, I was like, what do you mean there's only a 50% open rate? So But,
Advice, mate.
yeah, we're trying to have just kind of some standard sections in there. Margaret has helped me draft up for our next parliamentary inquiry standard section, the difference between a point of order and a point of inquiry. So,
Very long.
yeah, it's long. So Melanie and I were talking about like, okay,
Thank
we're
you.
gonna have to do like the hyperlink out, but trying to be, without being, scoldy post-meeting that just didn't go right? If there's confusion in the body about something, understandably, even when I was a member, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? A point of order seems like, how is this going, right? But it is more about things that have passed or are currently happening and kind of, so we're gonna have that as a standard section. So I think that's a way, everybody's got the rules, we know where we can go and look at them, but I think they're top of mind for members when you were in a meeting and, right? Like, oh, that's a confusion, right? So we're gonna try to kind of, we will have that as a standard section in the newsletter. And then I've asked the administrative staff, as we continue to encourage all members, y'all as well, to use that CO admin and at nashville.gov address. Again, that is an internal. I'm saying this in a public meeting, but that is for, members to make certain requests as they would have of staff, rather than saying like, oh, that's so-and-so or that's this person. And so we've asked staff as well, if there's something that they have as a new service or they're seeing as maybe a point of confusion or just something they want to highlight that they've done in the office. Going to ask them to have some standard content in there too. At present, we're going to get that on like a monthly cadence, such that you'll get that on the Sunday preceding the first council meeting of the month. And I welcome y'all's input about content in that newsletter that you think would be helpful to the body. But again, it's basically an internal audience. I think it is on Gov delivery, and if people want to subscribe to it, they're welcome to receive it. No, it's not. Okay, no. We are working towards an external newsletter too, but we're not there yet. So that will be on that one. But this is really kind of operational, functional, internal stuff. So be on the lookout for that under resources. And then as it relates to state and federal, you all are receiving every Friday from Theo Morrison, or actually from Margaret. It comes in to Margaret and I kind of in draft form on Thursday when we have a touch base meeting with Mr. Morrison, who represents us. That way, if Margaret has become aware of something or members have elevated something, we can bring it into his awareness, make sure it's being tracked. That said, his contact information is on there, so if you want to know where is something in a process, you're very welcome to be in touch with him directly. But that's a little more, again, in that space of tracking, watching, what's the status of this, where is this on our radar screen? So I would encourage you all to kind of, when time allows, kind of read into one of those reports and just see, is this organized in a way that's helpful to you? Is there any, as always, we're taking feedback. Want to make sure that that is a helpful resource to you. So if you have any feedback about, how it might be organized, or want to make sure that there are things in there that are being tracked and looked at, please do let us know. Anything else on that front, Margaret? Do y'all have any questions about that?
I find it helpful. I would say since we have a predominant party delegation, it is nice to have the reports of what that delegation is reporting out and happening. So I really appreciate that inclusion in the report.
Yeah,
So
Mr.
that's
Morrison
really helpful.
attended, I think that was their first meeting just recently of the Davidson County delegation. Last year before, or I guess at the start of the session in my capacity. I did, Chair Hemmer was kind to invite me, so I went up there just to kind of introduce myself. I think Darren Jernigan was introducing their new lobbyists, Butler Snow and Mandy Young, at this meeting, and having already met the delegation previously. I didn't attend, but Mr. Morrison attended for us and could share with us. So, and you'll see that again in his summary, which is a little more kind of topical to what happened that week. And so we are asking him to be mindful through Margaret and my meeting with him. You know, we've got the bill related to historic that is before us, right? And that is kind of counterpointed to a bill that is on the Hill. So we want to kind of pull that forward into the executive summary so that we kind of know what's going on with that. And so, you know, because we are tracking a lot of bills that have potential local impact, and potentially those can get a little bit lost in that kind of listing. Mr. Morrison is not going to lose track of him because that's his job to keep up with all those. But for y'all, the ones that might be sort of
to understand what the administration's actually talking about on legislation. So it's nice to have that reporting back from somewhere.
Yes, yeah. That,
The administration isn't sharing that directly,
Yeah.
as well as the change of RFP for and contract lobbyists. So that was helpful for that introduction.
yeah, thank you. Any other kind of questions or feedback in that state and federal relations space? Okay. All right, so next it's y'all's time to share your committee chair updates. And I will just go in order. Chair Gadd, you are recognized if there's anything you want to share.
Thank you. First of all, really happy to be back with the council. I'm really appreciative of the vice chair and other members of the committee, and of course the support from the council office staff and vice mayor while I've been out. Not really a formal leave, but out as a caregiver for my spouse. So he's doing well, and so it was really nice to be back last week and to actually be able to chair the committee. But so lots of thanks and lots of gratitude. So really do appreciate that and all the support. One thing we'll continue to reiterate with the committee, but just to make folks hear and may do a follow-up and request to kind of share this out to other executive committee members if possible, as we try to highlight any departments that we want to schedule as we approach budget season to come and do any type of a small presentation in front of the committee or answering subject matter questions. I'm going to try to get committee members to kind of bring those forward so we can get whatever couple of extra minutes we have, we can get those addressed. But the big one I'm waiting to hear back on is is from the Parks Department. We'll be trying to get dates of when they're going to do their updated plan to play. And I think that's going to be an interest of every council member, and so whether or not that needs to be a joint presentation with another committee, just so we bring more attention, I'll lift that up to perhaps the staff here, and we can kind of move that forward. But trying to figure out that'll be a larger one, I think, to really hear where we're going to be. What community engagement is. There going to be a community engagement process on those changes to the plan. So really that's probably the large one, a department that's kind of coming up.
Did they have communicated an anticipated timeline for that, for the plan to play update?
They had. I asked for another one, and I'm waiting to receive that. That was last year. They thought that this spring. So we're rapidly approaching spring with the weather this week. You can see that. So hopefully we'll get some feedback. I was under the impression we would that would be prior to July 1. So kind of coming up, but I'll confirm and then make sure folks are aware.
Okay.
But to me that's a very large something that's kind of come up or that's coming up that'll be I think a focus of the committee. We've got other committee members here present, so I don't know if there's something
also on that committee.
Exactly.
One thing that I would elevate to you for your consideration, I know in the Berry administration, when all these kind of master plans were kind of tracking together, so walk and bike strategic plan, in motion plan, plan to play master plan. We love to use the N's for the Nashville and in motion plan to all those things. There was, I wouldn't necessarily call it attention, but just a little bit of like, where do greenways live, right? And greenways for recreation, yes. Greenways also for transportation, yes. And I know that was sort of being struggled with a little bit when they did the last Plan to Play master plan. And so I would ask you, Chair, and your committee, just kind of keep that in mind to kind of understand kind of where and how that will be situated. Because understandably, sometimes that gets sort of compartmentalized, right? Because they have their own plan for that system itself. So how will that sort of work with the Plan to Play update?
That's wonderful. I'll make sure to kind of keep that update. I do I just want to lift up too, for anyone that's listening, the Arts Commission. I think all of us here are probably familiar. We do have an interim director, a new interim director, and I think we'll hear from her as we kind of move forward through the next, she'll continue to kind of update the committee on things that are ready to be updated. So she and I have been in great contact. That's the interim director of arts, Ashley Batchelder, and so she's been very communicative anytime we have questions that come up. So I anticipate that to continue. And so that's been a really wonderful experience to have her basically present. So we'll probably schedule some more time as there are updates to be had.
And Libraries has a new director.
Libraries has a new director. And so Terry Luke was the interim director. I know that that announcement has come with the board made that decision. And to bring her on full time. And I think we're moving on to the budget. We'll have Director Luke in front of the committee as well, as we did last session. The last budget cycle. So my goal is to kind of get folks lined up for presentations, which need to be short and brief. They'll spend more time in front of Budget and Finance, but they can highlight the priorities that we need to hear, and then save many of the details for Budget and Finance Committee. So.
Well, and I appreciate that. I was going to kind of bring that up at the end after your updates, but as you anticipate our budget hearings and as Margaret and staff coordinate with Chair Porterfield about that schedule for those hearings. Obviously, we have sort of our standard larger departments that are kind of always coming before us, but mindful of any particular budgetary concerns or recent news or things like that that you feel in your capacity as a chair that would be good for that department to have a specific hearing. Not every single department comes for a hearing, and sometimes that's totally fine, and not saying that's necessary, but as you think ahead to budget season, and do know that I feel, and I've shared this with Chair Porterfield, I think that time that department that is under the purview of your committee from an oversight perspective, you being kind of a part of making sure those are questions. I think as we handled it last time, Chair Porterfield first acknowledged you as a chair or the chair to maybe elevate some questions that were top of mind in that person's capacity as chair, right? And then also on the back end. So once council's asked some questions, in your capacity as chair, so when there's the parks budget hearing or the library budget hearing or the NDOT public hearing and so forth, making sure that is intentional so that the questions that you all have, so kind of be thinking ahead on that. Anything else to share, Margaret, from your perspective as far as setting that calendar? When will we probably have the calendar set?
We have the calendar ready to go. We just have not shared it with departments. We'll probably be doing that soon. And but it's pretty much the same cadence as last year and the year before. So
I would ask-
we're doing a little something different this year, planning to have 6 days of
Okay.
hearings and have fewer departments on each day so that the hearings can be more in-depth.
Okay.
And have a little bit of time that if some departments have special need that they need to come before the committee, they can request that of the chair. And so we have a little time built in, a little extra time, so we can add some committees, departments if need be.
Okay. And I can touch base with Chair Porterfield, but given that the calendar is already drafted at this juncture, and you're gonna allow a little room, do you wanna go ahead and send it to the chairs, please, and see?
I need to talk with Chair
Okay.
again to find out what she's thinking, but
Okay.
she and I need to talk this week about it.
Okay, alrighty. And she was, Chair Porterfield was not able to join us today for a work commitment, so,
We're
but
just
yeah.
kind of looking at following the same, cadence of notices that we've followed in years past, so.
Right, okey dokes. I apologize, that was a bit of a digression, but you brought up budget, and so I wanted to just go ahead and highlight that now. Okay, all right, Chair Cap, on charter.
Well, believe it or not, it's not too early to start thinking about our next charter revision process. The next ballot that a charter amendment could be on would be the 2026 general election ballot, or even possibly the primary ballot in 2026. And there's also 2027 ballot, but anything sort of metro related in order to be effective at the time of the 2027 elections and thereafter would probably have to be on the 2026 ballot. And so I think it's time for us to start scheduling out very preliminary meetings, probably for summer and fall. I'd like to have a process where we do a good job of getting ideas and feedback from council members, because that timetable really gets quick in 2026 in order to, for the committee to work through what ideas they want to pursue and then get them into language and get them onto the council floor so that we can hit deadlines. And of course, anything with any kind of significance to it is going to involve some pretty meaningful public engagement component. So I think that I would expect relatively soon, like spring, early summer, and I need to talk with Director Darby and Dr. Zeitlin about how we're going to schedule that and so forth, but look in your inboxes and calendars for Charter Vision Committee meetings, and just sort of early, I'd say this year, summer and fall will probably be taking ideas and developing thoughts and feedback, get sort of a preliminary, to the next phase, but that should be ramping up relatively soon.
And again, in your capacity as chairs, right, often you are aware, whether in your interaction with a department director or just, patterns of things that you have seen, you typically are the folks who have some of those ideas. And so obviously relay those through the council office, but to get to Chair Cap. But I appreciate you planning ahead, and I know we've talked about having a good long runway of leadership there to manage that process, so thank you for that. Okay, Chair Parker, you are next.
Thank you. So yeah, a couple of things. So the sales tax surcharge has begun to be collected from the Choose How You Move program. I was very excited to see the proposed summer service changes from WECO. Not like a sweeping giant thing we're going to do ribbon cuttings for, but shaving off good amounts of time on a number of routes, including, I think the most substantial one I saw was the weekday, like the midday, so not the rush hours. For the number 6, the Lebanon Pike is going from 60-minute intervals to 30-minute intervals. I mean,
That's huge.
For the folks using that line, that is a massive, massive improvement. And so I'm super duper looking forward to seeing more and more of these little service improvements and things as WEGO's able to staff up. And then I imagine we'll be learning more about kind of the capital side. We have our first, I forgot the specific cadence that was called for in the resolution of meetings with the administration and NDOT for updates to the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and other committees. There's a whole thing that we came up with, but I imagine we're getting close to having some of those meetings. We have our, I believe 18 people were nominated for
13.
13 people.
It felt like 18,
It
but it was just 13.
Yes.
Will feel like 18.
For 5 spots?
Yes.
Yeah.
So council
13 for 5
selects
spots.
5. We have 13 folks, and I definitely recommend everybody spend some time looking at those folks. There's a lot of really qualified people.
Agreed.
Looking forward to maybe that's a rules committee meeting to try to have in the chamber if that's possible. Okay, you don't have to answer that. This is my update. You don't have to-
That is a tough one to have because it falls so close to the meeting, and oftentimes we run in, especially with that many people, we run into
That's
the
understandable.
announcements period. But during that meeting, because of the number, this room will be an overflow room. So this television will be on with committee room 2, so you'll be able to sit in here, watch rules committee, and members can sit in here and watch and then go in when they're called.
Thank you. And we have the rule change now. I was thinking it was still the old days where we had to vote right after.
Right. You
And
have
so
to-
that's good. That's fine then.
Gives people time to watch the replay and.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absorb that, yeah.
I think the other kind of big thing that study-wise, process-wise that's going on is the housing and infrastructure study with planning. I know that folks are getting a little antsy around a lot of different things that they're interested in doing in the planning space because there's a lot of, oh, hold on, we need to see the recommendations in March before you can do this overlay, or hold on before you file this thing about this code change, or and my read is that, I mean, this is like a substantial, this is not like a planning for plan's sake to put another binder on the shelf. Like the planning folks are working really hard on this. We had a joint meeting of transportation infrastructure and planning committees, and I will say, go back and watch it. If you've seen Greg Claxton, who's heading up the housing and infrastructure study at planning, if you've seen Greg's kind of 12-minute version, it's basically just a longer version of that. There wasn't like recommendations or a lot of like specifics or new information for those of us who've been following. But I believe they're thinking that they will have some more substantial recommendations for us in the month of March, probably late March. So I think the goal is to have another joint committee meeting with kind of an explicit invitation to all members of planning and transportation committees to kind of hear from the planning folks and what their recommendations are as it relates to that study.
And that video as well, I think the landing page for the housing and infrastructure study. So again, planning department has their social media. I think they've had some graphics about the upcoming community meetings. But they do have a social media post that's kind of an all-in-one, basically for your constituents or, to share. Then when you land there, then you can see the special called meeting is there, and I think another just standard presentation they have is maybe the
12-minute
short
Greg
version.
Claxton
Right, yes, yeah,
version,
exactly.
which will give
Yeah.
you most of the information that was in the longer meeting that we had. And yes, as the Vice Mayor pointed out, there is a schedule of community engagement events. I think they're going to do sort of a similar thing to what they're doing with council as a body, where they're having this initial engagement pre-recommendations, and then after recommendations, they're going to schedule a bunch more of the stuff out in the community. So just like they're coming back to us after recommendations, they're going back out to do community engagement after those. That's all I really had to update folks on. Any questions or?
I was going to share, I didn't do it under federal relations, but by way of update, because it relates specifically to transportation, I have been appointed to the National League of Cities Transportation Committee, Federal Advocacy Committee.
Awesome.
And I, obviously, this is a really interesting and concerning space given this administration. And so a lot of the initial call with that cohort was very much about federal monies and grant monies and where are those and what does that mean for projects and so on and so forth. But I have shared with the mayor's office and NDOT and Mr. Skipper and Ms. Lacewell at GNRC that I am serving on that committee. So, annually, the National League of Cities sets its policies or its policy platform. A lot of that carries year to year. They've got a rail safety platform now, right? And that often just gets re-upped or refined but, I would imagine this year there's going to be a fair amount of change just given the climate and the environment. We had seen, and Chair Parker knows this, a lot more in the previous administration, direct appropriation to cities as opposed to the typical kind of pass-through structure. I do hope that, my service on the Transportation Policy Board of GNRC, adding this federal advocacy committee, but I do want to make sure through the council office and with our department partners, so when I have that online thing and they have a slide deck of all these things to kind of be mindful of, I'm trying to make sure that at a minimum gets to you, Chair Parker, but to the body, and just kind of share that information and be a conduit for that. So far, only one meeting, that was just last week, so I'll try to make sure you're getting that information, but I will be in DC for the NLC's congressional convening March 10th, 11th, 12th, and there will be some very specific infrastructure-related convenings. And so I do want to make sure to touch base with you and department and the administration just to make sure, because there's folks obviously from the federal DOT and NLC in particular very mindful of the difficult situation that some cities are in presently. So I do want to share that with y'all.
Thank you, yeah. And congrats on that national position, that national group that you'll be serving with. That's very cool. I get a lot of questions about how does the federal funding thing affect Choose How You Move? And the answer is we don't know exactly yet. The plan, the financial side of the plan is very conservative, the way it's projected out, as in conservative in the sense that it assumes that things don't go super well the entire time. So the plan figured on having lean years federally, it figured on having tougher years revenue-wise, and I think the big picture thing when we're looking at a 15+ year project is there's potential for the lean years to be at the front end of the project, and it's not ideal, but we did the whole thing is structured in a way that we figured there would be some lean years there for various reasons. So.
Well, and I think too, the service improvements that you were speaking to, right? That is something that with funds, no big construction project, right? Obviously there's a labor component there, but you can take an hour headway and make it a 30-minute headway, and a 30-minute headway and make it a 15-minute headway. We had a nice but brief convening this morning with the Special Olympics city selection team, Mayor was sharing about access ride and accessibility and our transportation system, and a member of the committee did have a question, y'all, you've passed this referendum. This is anticipated for, I believe, is it 2030, right? And so they were kind of wondering, well, what will Nashville kind of look like in 2030? And I think somewhat of the hidden question was, is everything going to be all ripped up for, massive, big kind of projects? And I think it was actually an interesting space to be able to respond. This really is about service frequency, and so some of that early deliverables are really going to just be in the kind of functional operational space. Maybe not booming and going and doing the biggest infrastructure on the front end is actually that it's a good thing. To your point, the plan contemplated those eventualities. So, okay, Chair Prep T for rules, confirmations, and public elections,
yes,
sir. Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Really, the big report is that I'm currently working with the Mayor's office to schedule a general meeting, or a specially called meeting, to discuss and to inform everybody about the special working groups on boards and commissions, everything that's been coming out of there. I know that on in our regular meetings, we've been discussing some legislation that have contemplated changes that have come out of the working group. So I think it would be incredibly helpful for members to get a debrief from the mayor's office and from Pro Tem Sepulveda on the work that's being done, so that we have broader context of legislation that we will see coming to us moving forward, because I do think that they are going to continue proposing changes to some of the way our boards and commissions operate. So that's really just the biggest thing coming out of that. It'll most likely be scheduled for the week of, let me look at my calendar really quickly, either the week of March 17th, so current dates that we're looking at are Thursday, March 20th, and if not then, likely Thursday, April 3rd, but you'll be getting that information as it moves forward. But yeah, so that's the big update out of Rules Committee. So.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. I think that's important, and I have shared with the administration. I think they've kind of taken on our terminology a little bit of working group, and I think sometimes that's created a little bit of confusion. That is not like a working group of a committee of the council, but that is sometimes has been called task force or otherwise, but situated in the mayor's office. Appreciate Chair Prep T from a continuity standpoint. Chair Sepulveda, in her capacity as chair, was actively in that work, and so she's kind of been sustained in representing on that group. But I do think it's very important that you're kind of pulling that forward and showing that work. Special Counsel Darby also represents the council and our perspective in that group. As they proceed through their work, and I think your meeting will kind of obviate what's in progress, but obviously at any time in your capacity as chairs, often there's a board and commission relative to a department that is interfaced with the work that you do. Questions, concerns, ideas, channel those to Ms. Darby. But I think your special meeting will show everybody kind of where they are in the midst of that and what their recommendations are. So I appreciate that. Okay, that is, do we have any updates from other chairs that were relayed to staff or the office? Okay.
Not received any.
Okay. Miss Rosie is here, and she is kindly working on, we're so close to the finish line on our new parade banners. And a general Metro Council with the seal table topper that you can kind of check out and use at your community meetings. And for our kind of Boy Scout and Girl Scout guests, sticker, pencil, pen, things like that. So we are very close to the finish line on some of those things, and appreciate all your work, Rosie, that you're doing on that. You're doing so much more than just that, but as that has been discussed and elevated through this committee before, I did want to mention that. And I think looking at staff just to make sure there wasn't anything else that you all wanted me to mention. You all obviously, through your updates and otherwise, anything else you want to bring into my awareness or suggest or ask, you have the floor before we adjourn, if there's anything else. Okay, look at us. We are adjourning 12 minutes early.
Hey.
With that, thank you again, and we are adjourned.